today. Today is Tess, the birthday and the yard site of the Mitteleh Rebbe. So really there are two things or three things that we need to know about the Mitteleh Rebbe. The first thing is that the Alter Rebbe, all the Rebbes, they go in a category. Everything is Hashkacha Pratis. The Rebbe says everything is Hashkacha Pratis, but especially what happens to a Rebbe is Hashkacha Pratis of Hashkacha Pratis. So if you imagine, your toenail is designed by God. If your toenail wasn't designed, you'd have a problem. But if your toenail is designed by God, imagine the cells in your brain, and then you'd really have a problem. So certain things have extra design, right? So this is a very, very important principle of life, which is that this really, in a way, the great revelation of Baal Shem Tov is that every single moment is a moment that has been designed to teach us something. That life is not, until the Baal Shem Tov, the way people saw life was, obviously if somebody was just struggling for survival, maybe what they call game theory, a zero-sum game, me versus you. But if they're a little bit, let's say they had a little bit food to eat, they had the time to think. So you're thinking, what's reality, right? So you're creating a picture of what is reality. And everybody has a picture they'll sell you, even today. Christians will tell you what reality is, 30,000 versions of it, but, Islam also probably 30,000. Everybody's got a version of reality. Then, however, the ultimate version of reality comes from Chassidus. And the Alter Rebbe was the Chachma, right? The Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid were like Kesser. That was like the kernel, the Tainug, like the general overview. Kesser gives you the general overview of the reality. So the Baal Shem Tov, everything in the Baal Shem Tov was it has everything but like in one point. It's just like the kernel of truth. And the Maggid Torah, a lot of people are not familiar with the Maggid Torah. Maggid Torah was very much the level of Rotzei, right? Kesser has Tainug and Rotzei. So it's like much more focused. So for example, when a person wants something, good morning, welcome. When a person wants something, it's because that thing will give him a pleasure, or he's trying to stay away from pain. They're connected. In fact, I just learned from the Mitteleh Rebbe something very beautiful yesterday. Just something very profound. He says that pain is the opposite of pleasure. So therefore, to the extent that you take pleasure in something is the extent that you'll take pain if you lose it. So if, let's say, there's somebody that you love very much, and God forbid you lose them, it's very, very painful because you love them very much. To the extent that you have pleasure in something, and he says something very fascinating. He says a person may have different pleasures. He gives an example. A person may want money. It's a pleasure. But then another situation comes along. He says, just to use an example, we're not naming names, but let's say a person is wealthy and he says, but I want to be the president of the United States. So he spends all his money for the covet for this position. So the question is, did he lose his pleasure in money? What happened here? And the answer is no, he didn't lose his pleasure in money. His new pleasure was greater than the pleasure of money. But the moment, let's say he gets what he wants, his pleasure for money will come back. Or even somebody that, God forbid, is sick. And he worked his whole life, he saved up, $1 million. Did he lose his desire for money? No, but his desire for life is stronger than his desire. But the desire still is there. So this is the Mitteleh Rebbe. Very interesting. The Rogatchover Goin, who we know was a very, very great genius. For those of you that are not familiar, he lived, I think it was times of Frierdiker Rebbe, or Rebbe Rashab. He was blessed by the Tzemach Tzedek to He was blessed by the Tzemach Tzedek to have like godless in Nigla, in the revealed part of the Torah. So he said that the Alter Rebbe was the Goin, right? Nobody was like the Alter Rebbe, but he says the Mitteleh Rebbe was the Goin HaGoinim. We know the Mitteleh Rebbe was very, very humble, but when you read his Torah, it's extraordinary how he's able to talk about the deepest concepts. He said something, I was just learning it yesterday. He says that there's no thought that disappears. Anything that you think remains. So he says, Chas v'shalom, if a person has negative thoughts, so they actually become the soul of, let's say, a demon or something like that. It actually manifests. And the higher, more spiritual a person is, the more, in a way, careful they have to be with their thoughts. They say that a machshava zara, a negative thought, not a negative thought, but a foreign thought of the Baal Shem Tov created a complete person. Because the higher we are, the more potent that thought is. The way I see it is like, if you're a guy playing around on a computer, you're not going to make a difference. But if you're in the source code, you're a computer programmer, you're going to make a really big difference. So we are already there in the source code. So we have to be very, very careful with what we think. In fact, something that I was studying yesterday, it's that whatever we're doing, we're basically creating in a way that the Eibush is doing it, the universe is doing this. And so therefore, if anything that we're engaged in a positive way creates that this is going to happen in a positive. So you're giving chesed. It's like Hashem is going to bring chesed into the world, whatever we're engaged with. And that's why, according to Chassidus and Kabbalah, one of the main things is just kind of being engaged in a positive way. Because if you're engaged in a positive way, then everything else becomes positive. And yeah. Yeah, true, 100%. But we do find that there's some people that think that it's to be like rigid, or even tough. That's not the way. Not only that, there was I think it was the Ruzhiner. Whenever somebody would come into shul and they were happy, he says, "Oh, you're making Hashem happy." They were sad. He says, "Oh, you're making Hashem sad." It's like we are directly connected. The example that I like to give of this is a guy created a company. And he put all his life and his investment in his company. I don't know, he's selling shoes. And then one day he gives it to his son. He says, "Yeah, you're the CEO of the company." So every single decision the son's going to make is going to affect the entire investment of his father. And the same thing, in the beginning, Hashem created a world where he said, Chafetz Chesed. Okay, here's the world. But now, whatever we do affects the entire creation in a very real way. Now, it's not to say that you can't change things, because that's the power of tshuva. But tshuva is not like, oh, wow, I did it, it was remain. No, tshuva actually goes back into the past, and it actually retroactively recreates the reality. Rebbe would often quote that based on a certain halacha that Chacham would paskin, there would be like a difference in reality, because Hashem, the past and the future are the same thing. He can go back into the past and change the past. So even though, let's say, a person, made a sin and they put an energy into the world, when they do a mitzvah, we all know the famous thing that it says in the Tanya, which is that if a person, there's a cute story, there was a Jew, I guess he went off the derech, so the Tzemach Tzedek said to him, whatever, Yankele, I really envy you. So he said, Rebbe, why do you envy me? So he said, because you did so many sins, and we know that when a person actually does tshuva, all the sins turn into mitzvahs. Wow, imagine the amount of mitzvahs you're going to get. So he says, Rebbe, wait a little bit more, you'll envy me even more. He said, if I then it might be too late. But the point is that the Mitteleh Rebbe lived a life. I mentioned this, I'm not sure which class I mentioned this, but the Tzemach Tzedek said that if you were to cut the Mitteleh Rebbe, blood wouldn't flow out, Chassidus would flow out. He lived the entire life of Chassidus. And in fact, it's interesting, we're not that familiar by now, there's not so many frictions between Chassidim and Misnagdim, but by the time of the Alter Rebbe, it was rough going. And when the Mitteleh Rebbe became Rebbe, he made a decree that the Chassidim should not daven, because there was a lot of fights in the Misnagdish minyan. He says, even if you're in a town, there's no minyan, you should go to the window and you should listen to Kaddish and Baruch Hu. So he really established in a very, very strong way. He was very, very strong. He established Chassidus. He had a desire that when Chassidim would meet, two people would meet in the marketplace, they'd be speaking about Yichudei Elah, Yichudei Tata. They'd be speaking about the concepts. He wrote a very important book that everybody should read. It's called the Aleph Beis, the ABCs of Chassidus. It's called Shar HaYichud Be'amunah. In fact, the Rebbe said that they should actually teach this book in university because it goes through the entire Seder, the entire order. The Alter Rebbe said about the Mitteleh Rebbe, I think he said it's Rebbe Levi Yitzchak, he knows the heavens like the back of a person's hand. Like he just had complete awareness of what's going on. And you see it in his writings, tremendous. He had the Mila of Bina, the ability to explain things, tremendous explanation. So the Alter Rebbe Shara Yichud is 12 chapters, 12 small chapters. The Mitteleh Rebbe Shara Yichud is 30 big chapters, going through effectively the whole Seder Shal, how everything works, and it's been translated into English. There are blogs on it. It's everything in a very, very beautiful way. So he also has a mimer called Mimer Hishtatus, which is it's printed in a booklet about what happens when you go to see a tzaddik. So a tzaddik, when you go to see a tzaddik, your soul connects to her soul. He also established, I think it was Baba Broisk, if I'm not mistaken, he established an entire city where we know the Shitta of the Baal Shem Tov was that the Jewish people should try to become farmers. They should go away from the cities. The poverty was very great. It was difficult to make a living then. And he established, I guess the government helped him out with a lot of land. And he established a location, and they gave seeds, and an entire Jewish community was established. And he sent Hillel Parcher to be like a mashpia, to be a teacher, and to teach these people. And really, I would say if you had to it's impossible to sum up the Mitteleh Rebbe. But if you had to sum up the Mitteleh Rebbe, it was the idea of the understanding of what we would call, Tanya in Shara Yichud speaks about Yehuda Tata and Yehuda Ilah, the lower level unity and the higher level unity. And so what that means is there are basically two realities. The first reality is how we perceive reality down here, which is a way that this world seems real and heaven is kind of above us. But then there's a higher reality, which is that at every single moment, this world is just within Hashem. And so where does that lead to? It leads to the fact that you are also within Hashem and that you have a role to play in His world. It's very exactly. That we, each and every one of us, have a very significant, very important role to play in this world. And just to conclude with a practical lesson, which the Rebbe says that we should be doing, is we should be studying the Torah of the Mitteleh Rebbe. And the Rebbe actually says specifically to study this Maimer Pada B'Shalom. He says the ultimate peace is that not like on davening, I think we mentioned the other day, that you have to fight the Yetzer Hara, but you realize that you're really a godly entity. And in that way, that everything you're doing is flowing from this place that in essence I am Hashem, and this is the will of Hashem, and there's peace in yourself. And when there's peace in yourself, as the Rebbe says, the last Sech of the Rebbe, that to create peace in the world, you have to have peace within your own self, which is the knowing that you are a piece of Hashem, and everyone's a piece of Hashem. And therefore, there's only one Hashem, so there's only one, so we're all actually one. L'chaim v'lebracha. Amen.